Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you how to paint this very quick and fun waterfall painting. Now that's a concept, it's going to be something like that, but I'm going to do this one on a rectangular shaped canvas. So what you need for this painting is a canvas or any surface painted black. Now the reason we do this is to first thing prevent little unpainted sections of canvas showing through in a finished painting, but more importantly the black or the paints gray or dark background, it acts to create the darkest dark or shadows quickly. It's quicker to create an impression of the shadows in the painting, and that's why we have a canvas that's pre-painted in black. You're also going to need an assortment of flat-headed and round tip brushes, including a few pointy ones like that for adding small intricate details. You're going to need a container of water, a palette. If you don't have a palette, an old plastic melamine plate would work just fine. For colors, you're going to need white, a brown, blue. I've got halo blue. You could also use any blue that you have, like ultramarine or Prussian. Then you're going to need a yellow. I'm using lemon yellow. You're going to need crimson, and I think that's about it. That's all you need to complete this painting. Right, so I might also use an ultramarine blue, which I don't have with me right now, but yes, those are all the colors that you're going to need. So for step one, we are going to start by drawing the concept on our canvas. Now you could use a chalk to do this step. I can't find my chalk, so I'm using a chalk pen. I wouldn't recommend using a chalk pen because it can be more time consuming to erase when you make mistakes as compared to a normal chalk. So definitely go for a normal chalk. So what we're going to do is roughly sort of eyeball the canvas in 2/3 horizontally and then vertically. All right. Okay, so very rough, it doesn't need to be exact 1/3. And then I'm going to position my waterfall there. Now you can have the waterfall as skinny as you like or as wide as you like. I think I want it to be really wide, extending to slightly on either sides of the 1/3 line. And I also wanted to have a nice long drop, so I'm going to end my waterfall lower than that 1/3 line. Okay, so that's the rough shape. I want the waterfall to have a little bit of a rocky edge cliff. This bit is up to you. You may not want rocks, you might want foliage, that's up to you, but it's good to have sort of a container to hold the waterfall, like it looks nicer to me. And then I'm going to have like a rough number 8 shape for foliage. All right, that's the rock there. We're going to have some rocks. I'm just going to draw a few rocks there, smaller rocks at the top, maybe some big ones at the bottom. All right, all the way down. Okay, and then that's going to be the river. I'm going to have maybe a grassy section here, so that sort of 1/2 curve is to represent where I'm going to do the foliage, and maybe we'll have a little bit of a grassy foreground here. Now that's just the rough abstract composition. We can tweak things as we go. Nothing set in stone. We are just using a chalk pen or a chalk. So anytime you change your mind, it's very easy to tweak things, wipe things, erase things that you don't like. Right, so step number 1, we are going to start with the sky. So I'm going to take some halo blue or any blue that you may have, and some white. Now I'm going to tell you a tip here. If you are using a palette of any sort, make sure that your paints are on one side and you have enough space to mix your colors. Now I'm a very messy worker, so eventually you'll see my whole palette just fill up with paint, but as far as possible you need to have your colors on one side and enough room to paint. Okay, so figure that out how you're going to do it depending on the shape and size of the palette you're using. Right, now I'm going to get another blue because I want the sky to have a different, slightly different blue tinge compared to the waterfalls, just so that there's a differentiation between the blue of the sky and the blue of the water. The other option is to add a hint of green to the sky mix, and that way the sky would look different. Sorry, not green, a hint of yellow. What am I saying? Right, so I'm going to get the yellow out. We don't need all of the colors just yet. I'm just getting them out, so it's all ready to go. Then we've got the crimson here, just a little bit, don't want too much at this stage. Acrylics dry very quickly, and I'm going to get another blue. So I've got a cobalt blue here, which I never intended to use, but I'll just have it here on the palette. Right, so I'm just going to get a bit more white. Right, did I mention this? I always recommend having only as much color as you need on the palette. If you have lots of paint, because acrylics dry very quickly, you'll find yourself constantly having to fix dried colors on your palette. You'll find yourself with a mess. So take what you need, because acrylics dry quickly. Right, now choose a flat brush that's proportionate to what you're painting. Now for a background you could go really thick, but when you do your waterfall or smaller shapes with the flat brush, you might want to swap to a proportionately smaller brush. So my canvas is 8 by 10, and that's the reason I'm using like a 3/4 inch flat brush and a 12 number flat brush. All right, so let's get started. What we're going to do is mix some blue. So I'm taking some water on my palette and creating a light blue color for the sky. So again, just repeating this tip, if you don't have two blue colors, what you can do to create the differentiation between the blue of the sky and blue of the waterfall is just add a hint of a tiny hint of yellow, like literally a tiny hint. All right, and what that's going to do is create this very light greeny blue, and it's very subtle, that difference. It's very subtle, but if you do that, the blue that you're going to get is going to be very different than that of the waterfall. All right, now when you do this, you're going to use crisscross brush strokes, and then you're going to blend it left to right. All right, strokes. Now if you're getting that streaky kind of a finish, it basically means that the paint is too runny. So the way to fix that is to just clean the brush and create the same color, but you're not going to add water, just you're going to make a thicker version of the paint that you've just created, the color recipe, and then go on top of it. Now I'm just allowing that blue to overlap some of those lines for the foliage there, because we don't want the foliage section to have like a dark outline. All right, and what I'm also going to do, I'm going to mix another batch of blue hint of yellow as we did before, and then just roughly, very roughly, just make like a patchy blue section there. The reason is we want some blues to be evident through the foliage of the leaf. It doesn't need to be like a solid blue patch, and some of those black spots and specks showing through, because then that will give the impression of the really dark intense shadows in the foliage. Right, now for the next step, what we're going to need is this flat brush. We're going to do the waterfall. We are going to clean the brush, and we want to wipe it on a rag so that we get a nice chisel tip. And what we also need is some blue paint. We don't want a thick blob on the tip of the brush, we just want it to be enough. Now if your paint is thick and toothpastey, my paint is fluid, but if your paint is thick and toothpastey, you might want to dilute it a bit. Right, so I've loaded the tip of the brush with paint, and it's nice and fluid. I've not lost the chisel tip, as you can see. Then I'm going to draw a line and then drop. Draw a line and then drop. Alright, so when you do that, we draw a small line and we drop, small line and we drop. You're basically creating the drop effect of the waterfall. We also don't want a lot of paint, water on your brush or your paint, because otherwise you're not going to get that wispy waterfall look, and it's actually called a dry brush effect. And you can do all sorts of effects with a brush that's dry. If you find that the brush is not running as like that, you're just going to dip just the tip of the brush with water, not the whole brush. Moisten it a bit, massage some paint. We just want a little bit of moisture on the tip of the brush, and then keep going. Keep going all the way to the edge of the rocks, right? We don't want to go all the way down to the waterfall. You can bring some of that blue down, but we don't want it to touch that edge. We just want a little bit of that black showing through at the bottom. All right, and then what we're going to do is use that same blue color, but this time we're going to do ripples in the water at the base. So we are going to create little streaks going zigzag, 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 and let it overlap near the section where we have marked out the area for the foliage, and just go zigzag, 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 making sure that you don't lose out the black background, right? All right, easy, cool. Now next step, what we're going to do is mix a bit of white to that blue paint. We don't want to use the sky blue color, we've got yellow in there, so we're just going to use that pure blue and add some white there. And this time we are going to repeat the process with that light color, okay, while it's still wet. Okay, easy. And going to use that same color to just have some thin streaks at the base of the waterfall, and maybe a few bolder streaks at the front. Alright, zigzagging its way to the front. And we're going to repeat that a few times till we almost near the pure white color. Does that make sense? So I'm going to repeat that, but this time with a much lighter blue. At the base, I'm just going to take some pure white and create a bit of a fuzzy effect. This is just the mist that builds up at the bottom of the waterfall. So I'm finger painting a little bit of fuzzy mist. So the way to do that is to take some paint on the tip of your finger, dab any extra. We don't want a blob of white paint there. So I'm going to dab that on the palette and then create a mist. Now this is just the base. We are going to come back and tidy this up later. I'll show you how to do that, but right now we just need to do the base coat for the waterfall. Right, now that waterfall is looking pretty good. Next step we are going to do are the rocks. So for the rocks we are going to start with that brown color, and same flat brush. We're just going to load enough color on the tip of the brush, and then I'm going to do press and flick some brown color on just the tip of that rock there. I don't want to sort of lose the black contrast that I have, so I'm using the tip of the brush to just fill up a little bit of those rock shapes we have going there. Then what I'm going to do is take some of that brown, add a bit of water, rinse my brush, take a tiny bit of red, just a tiny little bit of red on the corner of my brush, mix that with the brown that we just used for our rocks, and then use that brown to create some streaks to create an impression of the trunk of a tree. All right, so I'm just creating a few streaks. It's very abstract, and then just drawing these streaks, and then I'm going to have some very impressionistic roots, all right, fading into that black color there. Okay, adding a little bit more red, make it more warmer, and then a tiny bit of yellow, like a tiny bit of yellow, and that's going to sort of warm up the brown, the yellow, and make it a bit more orangey. And then I'm going to create some branches. Still using the chisel tip brush like so, and most of these branches are going to be just like little V's emerging out of the tree, and we can always add some more as we go, but right now we're sort of making very impressionistic tree branch. And then I'm going to add a hint of the blue there, even if you don't have, the sky blue there, into the brown. Yep, into the brown. Doesn't matter if it's going to create like this coffee brown, almost coffee brown color. And then I'm going to add a few more streaks to the right hand side of the trunk. And then I'm going to take some of that light brown color and just add a little bit, like very little, on the rocks that we just made. Just a little bit, not too much. We just want to show some light effects on the rock. All right, that's starting to look pretty good. Right, now it's time for some foliage. So to do the foliage, what we need is some green, and the way we are going to do that is take some blue, and then that's a yellow, and then take some blue and create a green. And you want, for starters, a very like a bluey dark green, and so I'm just going to subdue that green by adding a little bit of brown. Okay, going to need some more blue. I might just take some of that blue. Right, going to add some more brown. So initially, for starters, you're going to need a very dark green, and the way to do that is to mix yellow and blue, get it green, and then subdue that green with some brown. All right, I might actually swap to a big round brush. So I want to use like the edges of the round brush. So I'm using number 6. You could also use a fan brush if you like, but what I want is to just create like little blobs of green paint, like little blobs. Go. Yep, it's perfect. So I'm going to put that at the base of the green, and you don't want like a solid mass of green there. What you are aiming for is foliage, basically foliage that is very dense, right? We're aiming for dense foliage. Now if you find that you are losing some of the branches or twigs or whatever you have created previously, it's okay, it really doesn't matter, because it's meant to be a very abstracty fun painting, and it's perfectly fine if you end up with a painting that looks different. It's your painting, and you may have something that looks very different than what's happening here. So right, I'm going to use some of that blue color just to flick some grass. Right, little fuzzy grass here. Okay, the next color I'm going to mix is going to be way brighter than the green that we've just used. So I'm just going to lift off some of that blue green and then add yellow to it, and look at that, how bright and happy is that green. All right, you can make it as bright as you like, and then we're going to come on top of this and just do the top sections of the green that you have previously painted. We don't want to cover the blue green, we just want to add a layer on top of it. Right, does that make sense? There we go. Right, I'm just going to flick some grass there. So for the grass, that brush is too big and thick, so I'm just going to swap the brush for a minute. I'm going to take that nice long detail brush or rigger brush. That's a rigger brush, it's not a detail brush, right? And then just make some really fine grass. Just press and flick some grass. It's not meant to be very perfect. And for this rigger brush to create nice lines or uninterrupted lines, you need to make sure that the paints are nice and fluid, otherwise it doesn't work, right? So going back to the round brush, where did I put it? Oh yeah, there it is, right. So I'm going to mix some white, and I need a little bit of yellow. I'm just going to add the bright yellow to the section where we have the waterfall. Just bright green patches. It's nothing different to what we just did. Just want a little bit of those bright green patches there. Right, that's looking pretty good. Now what we're going to do is do the green that we previously mixed, we're just going to add a tiny hint of red, just a tiny hint of red, and then we are going to create some grass there at the base. And then we're just going to take a small flat brush and just blend the base. Actually, not blend the base, we're just going to create little grassy specks and spots. I'm adding some darker greens there because otherwise it's all sort of looking very monotonous, and the way to do that is to the blue-green mix. I've just added a hint of brown. Right, that's looking pretty cute. And then I'm going to take that bright lemon yellow color and then add some fuzzy looking grass there. That's looking pretty cute. Right, now you can, if you like, that side is looking pretty brown and empty, just clean that flat brush, the small one that you have taken. I'm using a number 6, and then this time you want the tip of the brush to be a bit fuzzy so that you can create some moss or tiny little grass on these rocks or cliff. And we're going to do the same technique. We're going to have some darker green with a bit of, and I feel that side could do with a bit of foliage, so I'm just going to add some dark blue green color there to create the impression of maybe some distant trees. Again, we are starting with a dark base and then adding a gradual layer of lighter green and then some bright foliage there. Alright, and then if that's looking quite good, I'm just going to add some trunks. All right, that's looking really nice. In my water before I do anything, you see how murky that is? So I want to go on top of this painting and tidy up some highlights, which is using the brightest bright, and for that you're going to need clean water. So if you reach that stage, make sure you change the water. I'll be right back. Okay, so clean water, and for the whites to go on properly, what you also need is for this layer to be a little bit dry. I do have a hair dryer here, so I might just dry the sky so that the highlights are more emphasized and brighter. So if you've made it so far and you're happy with the foliage and you don't need any wet on wet effects, which is where the wet paint blends in seamlessly with the previous layer, oops, then it's time to dry the canvas with a hair dryer. Right, now it's time to just add the highlights, and what that means is adding white to areas where the light is touching the painting, or not the painting, touching the objects in the landscape. So I'm just taking a little bit of white on the tip of the brush, getting rid of any of the excess paint, and just adding subtle touches of white on the rocks. I'll be doing that same thing with, now you could use the big flat brush that we use for the rocks, but if you don't want to, that's fine too. So next I'm going to add little fuzzy dots at the bottom of the waterfall. Some of the dots go in V, so this is where the water is splashing, so you might want to make like little V's and big V's, V-shapes dots. All right, and then I'm going to add some more white. And we also want to add a little bit of brown streaks in the water to show the reflection of the rocks. Now you could make streaks like that if that's easy, or you could also do vertical streaks like that and then just blend it into the painting. All right, and then maybe a little bit of that green in some areas just to show the green from the foliage. Okay, I'm going to take some white paint and then just make little circles of mist. If you lose those little V-shaped bubbles, just add them back again. I'm just making little V-shaped bubbles to show the splash of the water. All right, next I am going to go back and add white to the tip of the waterfall. So if you remember the first step, we just want a little bit of paint on the top, and then we are going to draw a line and drop. I'm just going to add a little bit of blue there. A little bit of blue-green to sort of show the reflection of water. And that's looking pretty good to me. I have a feeling that I could add one more little waterfall somewhere in this painting. Perhaps here, because it looks a bit too empty there. So let's swap to like a small brush, smaller flat brush, because it's going to be like a little small waterfall from there. Maybe one here. Adjust that bit. Okay, last step. I think it needs some warmer colors too. So what we're going to do is we are going to create some little flowers by mixing red and white. Or you could use any warm color that you like, but I prefer using pink because it looks really cute with this, with all the other colors we've got going here. one last thing, just one last thing. I'm just going to add a little bit more white to the sky there. It just doesn't look as bright as I wanted it to be. Just going to let that overlap the foliage there, and there, and there. Okay, I think that is looking pretty good. I'm going to sign that off. So towards the end, what I did was I added more blue, just because the blue was less. It seemed to be very dark in the foreground, and I wanted to make sure that the waterfall was bright and blue and the blue was different from the sky. So that's what I did, and I also added two little waterfalls there, some pink flowers in the foreground and some receding into the background, and I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. So I'm just going to sign that painting off.